the first responders and the rescue workers who rushed towards danger to look for survivors at ground zero, exposing themselves to life-threatening toxins, as well as those who worked and lived in the area and had their health negatively impacted. Just last week, the FDNY added the names of 43 members who died of illnesses related to their work in the rescue and recovery efforts at the World Trade Center. This adds to the hundreds of first responders who have died from 9/11 related illnesses over the past 22 years. Too many families and victims are still struggling from the aftermath of this tragedy, and it's imperative that the city, state, and federal governments provide them with the full support they need to recover. It's through action that we can honor their sacrifice. Now I want to take a moment to address the alarming rise in xenophobic and hostile sentiments being directed at and about migrants arriving in our city. We must recognize that such sentiment does nothing to address our challenges and brings with it risks to the safety of women, men, and children, and everyone's humanity. Throughout history, we've seen how this can translate to real danger and harm for communities. It is inconsistent with our values as a city and as a nation, and we must not permit our dialogue to devolve towards such division. It will only move us further away from solutions that move our city forward. People seeking asylum are fleeing dire humanitarian conditions. They have endured harrowing journeys, leaving behind everything they know for the chance to have a better life here. This migration to the United States is not entirely unique. Each generation has figured out how to integrate immigrants and refugees, and we have always become a stronger nation because of it. It is a grave mistake to act as if we as a city are powerless and that people seeking asylum are a threat or simply a cost. In fact, we know ourselves from the story of New York City itself that migration brings tangible benefits. Throughout our city's history, immigrants have enriched our culture, economy, and communities. When we last faced a fiscal crisis and an exodus of New Yorkers, it was immigrants who played a key role in growing our population and economy. We're in a similar situation today, and we should recognize that if we address some of the underlying challenges that longtime New Yorkers face along with asylum seekers, we will be stronger. The reality is, longtime New Yorkers from immigrant communities or those who are unhoused have many of the same needs as recent migrants. These needs were insufficiently addressed before this migration, and we owe it to our longtime residents in our entire city to fix the shortfall. We should be investing in strengthening the infrastructure of programs and services that have long been serving New Yorkers without adequate support. By bolstering this infrastructure, all of us will benefit. This is achievable because no challenge is too great for New York City. How we respond in this moment will have long-term implications for all of us. All stakeholders at every level of government and in the nonprofit and private sectors must set aside their differences to effectively work together to implement solutions that power a long-term strategy that is sustainable. We're always stronger when we're united. We need to come together and advance solutions that best serve the people we represent here in our city, in our state, and in our nation. And now we're going to move on to our stated agenda. First, we'll vote on the following finance items: a transparency resolution approving new designations and changes of certain organizations receiving funding in the expense budget. 4 pre-considered resolutions to authorize Article 11 exemptions for 8 buildings in Council Members Sanchez and Felice's districts. Next, we'll vote on the following land use items. The City Council is approving a limited 5-year extension of the Madison Square Garden, or MSG, special permit and modified arena text amendment. It is intended to resolve the competing demands on this area and facilitate the collaboration of stakeholders to create a truly integrated arena and transit station complex that the public deserves. The term extension is conditioned on MSG submitting a transportation management plan to start addressing the needs of the public immediately. 893 Eagle Avenue rezoning in Councilmember Salamanca's district will facilitate the development of a new 13-story plus cellar and subcellar building. It will include approximately 83 affordable supportive housing units with additional space for counseling offices and multi-purpose rooms serving the residents of the building. Today, we will vote on the following resolutions. First, we have a pair of resolutions sponsored by Councilmember Natasha Williams. Resolution 346A, which would recognize the contributions of hip-hop to arts and culture by designating August 11th as Hip Hop Celebration Day, August as Hip Hop Recognition Month, and November as Hip Hop History Month annually in the city of New York. And Resolution 450A, which would recognize the contributions of our homegrown Def Jam to the music industry and music lovers everywhere by designated January 2024 as Def Jam Recognition Month in the city of New York. Resolution 415A, sponsored by Councilmember Joanne Areola, would call on the United States Congress to pass and the President to sign the September 11th Day of Remembrance Act. Today, we'll also vote on the following pieces of legislation. Introduction 1080A, sponsored by Councilmember Linda Lee, would require the Department of Social Services to make information on emergency feeding and food benefits programs and senior centers available on DSS's website, as well as through Access HRA. The building would also require DSS, in collaboration with the Department of Aging, to make this information available in written form at job centers, senior centers, SNAP centers, and any other relevant locations. Councilmember Linda Lee, I invite you now to come up and speak about your legislation.
Didn't realize I was going first. Okay, thank you so much, Speaker Adams. And you actually summarized the bill so well, I don't really feel like I have to repeat it. But one thing I did want to emphasize is that, you know, when COVID first hit, I was still working in the nonprofit sector. And, you know, when I was running senior centers and Meals on Wheels programs, we saw, and something I heard throughout my district and my area was, you know, I never needed to access food benefits or access meals, but for the first time I need to do that either through loss of jobs or they were homebound and needed to, you know, find out how to get those meals to their homes. And so, you know, the reason why that's one of the main reasons why we came up with this legislation, because more and more New Yorkers are needing access to a lot of the food benefit services. And so we wanted to make sure that it was in a place that was easily available, where it was easily searchable, depending on your area code, your zip code, certain demographics, what your needs were. And so we're very proud. And obviously, you know, with any legislation, we need to work with the administration and the city agencies to make sure that the implementation and the capacity is there. And so that's something that, you know, we will continue to do. But this is something that I felt was very important to put into legislation, because we need to make sure that we are making information as accessible as possible, especially for those that need meals and services that are food insecure. So just wanted to give a special shout out to Speaker Adams for your leadership in prioritizing socially impactful legislation like this, and also, of course, Deputy Speaker Diana Ayala as her role as chair of the Committee on General Welfare. And she does lend tremendous guidance and empathy to all legislation that passes through her committee. And of course, David Romero, Committee Counsel at General Welfare, and all the rest of the council staff that worked on this. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilmember Lee. Next, we will vote on Introduction 877B, sponsored by Councilmember Sean Abreu, which would require the Department of Citywide Administrative Services, or DCAS, to create a comprehensive exit survey and interview protocol for city agencies to gather feedback from resigning and retiring municipal employees regarding their experience in the city's workforce. The legislation, intended to improve retention of municipal workers, would also require DCAS to submit an annual report to the Equal Employment Practices Commission and the Council with summaries of the exit survey and interview responses. I now invite Councilmember Abreu to discuss his important legislation.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. New York City government is the largest municipal employer in the country, employing more than 300,000 civil servants who safeguard our rights, teach our children, protect our communities, and keep our water clean. These purpose-driven individuals have committed their lives to serving their neighbors and keeping our city running smoothly. They are the backbone of our city. But unfortunately, public servants are leaving city positions in droves. The stats of the staffing crisis are alarming. Thousands upon thousands of municipal workers have left city government in the last 2 years. There are now 24,000 vacancies across city agencies, with some agencies posting vacancy rates as high as more than 20%. To put it plainly, the status quo isn't working, and it hasn't been working. We are losing good people, but we haven't asked them why. Why are you leaving? What would it take for you to remain in public service? How can the city be a better employer? We need that testimony to make a worker-informed plan for attracting and retaining talent. These are very simple questions that's very commonplace for employers to ask. And it's about time that we are finally doing that. And this starts with the legislation that we're passing today, which requires city agencies to offer exit surveys and interviews to departing employees, a common practice by employers everywhere. By understanding why are people leaving, we can build a better workplace environment to attract, hire, and retain the best of the best in public service. These exit surveys will be created by DCAS, who is responsible for submitting a report to the Equal Employment Practices Commission, and the Speaker summarizing the survey findings by March 30, 2025. We can't find solutions without asking basic questions. And that is exactly what we're doing today. I look forward to analyzing that data with DCAS once it's published. And just want to thank our speaker for really leading this fight on making sure that we are addressing the city staffing crisis head on and that we start answering these basic questions. Thank you so much, Madam Speaker. And I also want to thank Chair Carmen De La Rosa.
Thank you, Council Member. We will also vote today on introductions 969A, sponsored by Council Member Mercedes Narcisse, which would require the Department of Small Business Services to provide information on community development financial institutions, or CDFIs, via the one-stop shop online portal established by Local Law 94 of 2022. CDFIs can provide small businesses and minority and women-owned business enterprises with critical access to capital that supports their successes. An issue I highlighted in my State of the City address, and I'm really happy to hear from Councilmember Mercedes Narcisse to discuss her important legislation.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Good afternoon, everyone. I want to formally thank you, Madam Speaker, for your leadership, for pushing for equity in New York City, and especially as a former small business owner, it is imperative for us to give the time and understanding, and of course to all the team of Legislative Department, thank you, and of course, Madam Chair, thank you, Julie Menin. As our city rises from the challenges of COVID-19 pandemic, we stand at a pivotal moment. We have the profound obligation to reinvigorate the very heartbeat of our city, our small businesses. Ensure 969A is not just an amendment, but a testament to our unwavering commitment. It is a commitment to ensuring that as we build, every entrepreneur, every local store, and every innovative startup has the foundation and support they so rightly deserve. Community Development Financial Institution, or CDFIs, have been our unsung heroes. These institutions have constantly reached out to those often overlooked and lacking financial support. Now, more than ever, the role of CDFI is invaluable. It's time we bring them to the forefront, amplifying their impact and their importance. By advocating for transparency, ensuring accessibility, and fostering deeper collaboration with CDFIs. We are not just laying bricks. We are constructing avenues of fair and inclusive economic growth for every New Yorker. Let's come together to guarantee that our city's entrepreneurs, from our cherished mom and pop stores to our building trailblazers, have every tools at their disposal. By endorsing this legislation, we are not just passing a bill, we are issuing a resounding call. New York City believes in, supports, and champions its small businesses. As a small business owner, I encourage that all my colleagues sign on this bill because together, let's pave the way for a resilient, thriving, post-pandemic New York City. After all, the small business is the backbone of our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Narcisse. Next, we will vote on Introduction 1103A, sponsored by Councilmember Julie Menin, which would require the Department of Small Business Services to post information on its website that helps small businesses select banks, including the loans, grants, and services available to them at various banking institutions. Introduction 263A, also sponsored by Councilmember Julie Menin, would require the Department of Small Business Services to produce an annual report on services provided at Workforce One career centers, including the number of people helped in obtaining jobs and job training. And I now invite Councilmember Menin to the podium to speak about her important bills today.
Great. Thank you so much. I really want to thank you, Madam Speaker, for your leadership in pushing these bills forward, and I want to congratulate my colleague, Councilmember Mercedes Narcisse, on her important bill in the Small Business Committee. So as the Speaker said, I have two bills from the Small Business Committee. One of the bills, 1103, would require the Department of Small Business Services to post information and really work with small businesses on finding a bank. The reason why this is important is we saw earlier this year with the collapse of SVB and also the issues around Signature Bank, so many of our small businesses had money tied up in these banks. If these small businesses lose their capital, they cannot continue. And so the importance of this bill is to give small businesses the information they need to make an educated decision on what bank to bank with, as well as any hidden fees and other issues that they might encounter. The second bill, Intro 263, requires the Department of Small Business to produce an annual report around Workforce One centers. This also is an incredibly important issue. We know that we have a real crisis in terms of a labor shortage in so many different areas, hospitality and healthcare. For example, so many restaurants are facing a labor shortage. We now need to pair New Yorkers that are looking for work with these jobs. But we found in our oversight hearings that SBS was not giving us the information we need in terms of transparency around Workforce One centers. So this bill is a reporting bill that really will get us the hard data that we need on our Workforce One centers to demand the kind of changes that we need around these centers. So thank you so much, and thank you, Speaker.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember. Next, we have Introduction 962A, sponsored by Majority Whip Sylvina Brooks Powers. It would require the Department of Parks and Recreation, or DPR, to identify locations where additional public swimming pools could be built, with a focus on communities that are currently lacking access. The legislation would also require that Parks consults with the Department of Education on creating a plan to open its school pools to the public, as well as offer free swimming lessons at indoor swimming pool locations. I invite Majority Whip Sylvina Brooks Powers to the podium to discuss her very important legislation.
Thank you. I'm so excited to stand here alongside the Speaker and my colleagues here today to talk about the importance of water safety and how the Council is addressing this issue legislatively. New York City is a city bound by water. We have 520 miles of coastlines along the oceans, rivers, bays, and inlets, which is more than Miami, Boston, LA, and San Francisco combined. Despite this, too many New Yorkers are deprived of the opportunity to learn to swim and to swim safely. Drowning is the #1 killer of young children nationwide. The #1 killer. And children of color are especially vulnerable to drowning. Today, 1 out of 3 black students can't swim, while only 1 out of 10 white students cannot. Pool access provides community members, including and especially children, the chance to develop swimming skills in a supervised environment. But 18 council districts, most of which are in historically underserved outer borough communities, lack public pools. Pool access provides community members, including, again, and especially children, the chance to develop swimming skills in a supervised environment. And we must do better. That's why we are passing a package of bills today to improve water safety and equitable access to swimming in New York City. I am proud to sponsor Introduction 962, which requires the Parks Department to conduct a survey of sites owned by the city to identify locations where additional public swimming pools could be built, with a focus on communities that do not have access to pools. Parks will also have to assess the ongoing capital needs of its pools and update the assessment, and work with the DOE to create a plan to open school pools for public use. I'm also sponsoring a bill that will be heard later this month, which would require the Department of Health to report annually and publicly on drownings in the city. The report would include the location of each drowning, the demographics of the victim, and additional information about the circumstances of that incident. As of now, we don't have aggregate publicly available data on how this crisis is affecting our neighborhoods. This reporting will empower policymakers and advocates to develop more effective programs and policies to address drowning. Every New Yorker should have the opportunity to swim, not only enjoy the city's waters, but to protect themselves from danger. I want to thank my colleagues and the Speaker for her steadfast leadership on water safety. She made the commitment to address this issue in her State of the City, and today the City Council makes good on that promise. I know this council will continue to fight for equitable access to pools and programming that empower members of our community to swim safely. Thank you.
Thank you. So important. Thank you, Majority Whip. Lastly, we will vote on Introduction 949, sponsored by Majority Leader Keith Powers, which would establish a first-of-its-kind e-bike battery trade-in program to help remove uncertified batteries that pose fire safety hazards. Individuals would be able to receive new powered mobility devices, meaning electric scooters, electric bikes, etc., or lithium-ion batteries to power them that meet relevant fire safety standards. Such devices and batteries would be provided at a reduced or no cost and available in exchange for the surrender of devices that do not comply with fire standards or are otherwise illegal. I invite Majority Leader Powers to discuss his legislation.
Thank you, Speaker. Very, very excited to be here today to be passing our bill that would create a new trade-in program, first of its kind, first in the nation, to require or allow, I should say, individuals to be able to surrender the unsafe batteries or bikes that are causing the fires throughout the city. We're here today to address an ongoing crisis that's happening throughout our city. I think almost everybody here has had a fire in their district, tragically. It feels like every week we're reading news stories about fires related to unsafe batteries. The numbers this year alone: 175 fires, 96 injuries, 14 deaths caused by e-bike battery explosions. If you do that on average per week, it's 4 per week. And these fires destroy homes, they're displacing families, and they're leading to injuries and deaths across our city. I had you might remember, a very heroic rescue in Midtown last year in my district, where the firefighters actually had to go in through the window because the entire apartment had been destroyed. This bill would help complement the law that's going into effect this week, which we passed earlier this year, to ban the sale of uncertified bikes and batteries. And as we had that conversation in the council with advocates about pushing that law forward, we recognize that there are unsafe batteries and bikes that are on the street here today, and what better than to help get those off the street as we create a new requirement. And working with the deliveristas, the apps, the FDNY, and my colleagues, we designed a program here where individuals who are using those unsafe bikes or devices right now would be able to have a opportunity to trade those in. The program's 2 years. It's going to be a multi-million-dollar effort for FDNY and DOT and other agencies collaborating together to help facilitate that, and obviously getting unsafe devices and batteries off the street in replacement for certified safe bikes. I'm very, very excited about that. And of course, we mentioned earlier with Councilmember Brewer and Councilmember Feliz, a new package of bills that's also coming in today to continue to further that, addressing that crisis. But today, we're telling New Yorkers we're taking a very, very big measure to keep your neighborhood safe by giving individuals an opportunity to take that unsafe device and hand it in and get a much safer device in return. And we think that is going to save lives without question in the short term, as we also design a longer-term strategy to this. So thank you to all the staff here and my staff particularly for working so hard on this. I want to thank the Speaker for prioritizing this and acting with urgency at a very, very challenging moment around e-bike fires. Thank you.
Thank you. And along the same lines of keeping our city safe, I now invite Councilmember Gail Brewer to speak about her legislation.
Thank you very much. I am here to talk about trees, and I want to thank certainly Councilmember Chair of the Parks Department, Krishnan, and the Speaker. We know how important tree canopy is. These trees provide us with clean air and water, help to mitigate climate change, and improve our quality of life. But despite all of that, trees and vegetation are under threat in New York City. In recent years, we have seen a decline in our tree canopy due to factors such as development, pests, disease, and New Yorkers don't water their trees. They need to. And of course, it has a negative impact. So, Intro 1066 will help to address this. It will require the Office of Long-Term Planning and Sustainability to consider the role of trees, tree canopy, vegetation, as it does sustainable planning. And hopefully that would help our city's sustainability, because the goals then would be aligned with the protection and preservation of trees and vegetation. I think I remember, we all do, when Mayor Bloomberg launched the Million Tree Initiative, but then there wasn't a requirement outlined for the city to make progress on the initiative. Administrations have been inconsistent in their commitment to this issue. And I certainly know that Mayor Adams has Plan NYC, and it's a plan for growth and sustainability. But we can't always plan for every administration to do the right thing on sustainability. So with Intro 1066, it's our chance to do something now that will have a long-term impact for our city, no matter. I'm very much of a tree hugger, as many others are. We have done a survey in my district of all the vacant tree pits. It takes actually 10 years until that tree becomes carbon neutral, and we have to make sure we water it every single time. It's well past time that trees should be an integral part of our city's long-term sustainable planning. Thank you, everyone, for your support, and certainly Shula Puda from my office, Chair of the Parks Committee, and our wonderful Speaker. I don't know how you put up with all of us, Madam Speaker. Thank you very much.
I don't think she does either.
We'll talk later, Gil. And now, rounding out our speakers today, we're going to hear about Introduction 1017A, sponsored by Councilmember Shekhar Krishnan. It would help the city better prepare for upcoming beach and pool seasons by requiring the Department of Parks and Recreation to submit an annual report to the mayor and council on lifeguard staffing levels and training for the city's pools and beaches, the number of emergencies that occurred at each beach and pool, and the current number of pools that are closed for public use due to maintenance or other issues. I invite Councilmember Krishnan to the podium to speak about his legislation.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much, Speaker Adams. I'm Councilmember Shekhar Krishnan, the chair of our Parks and Recreation Committee in our City Council. Today, as we've heard from our speaker and from our colleagues here, We have a number of really important pieces of legislation passing through our Parks Committee into the full council, addressing both improving water safety and expanding pool access and expanding our urban forest in New York City. I'm very grateful to Speaker Adams because with your leadership in the City Council, we've prioritized making sure that every New York City child, as Speaker Adams mentioned in her State of the City address, knows how to swim, and that we are supporting and expanding our tree canopy across New York City. The piece of legislation we're passing today quite literally will save lives. And I want to focus for a minute on our pools bills, and I've been so proud to work with Majority Whip Brooks Powers and Councilmember Menin on a number of pieces of legislation to address these issues. 1 in 4 New York City children does not know how to swim. 2 out of 3 New York City children does not have access to a single public pool in their community, and that includes in my district in Jackson Heights and Elmhurst. And the racial disparities of these statistics are abundantly clear. With our bills today, we are going to tackle this issue head on. And I'm proud to be sponsoring legislation that specifically addresses the lifeguard crisis in our city. We know that the shortage of lifeguards here in New York and across the country is a crisis. We've seen it every summer, and every story we read of a drowning in the Rockaways or another beach is a painful and stark reminder to us of what we need to do to ensure that we have adequate lifeguard staffing at all our pools and beaches. In our Parks Committee hearings this past year and last year, we focused on this issue, and we know that to ensure that we have adequate staffing, the work for next summer begins now. My piece of legislation will address this issue because if we are going to make sure we have adequate staffing at our pools and beaches, we have to first require greater transparency and accountability from our Parks Department. When it comes to the hiring process and numbers of lifeguards who are hired every summer, as well as making sure that we're reporting, and Parks is reporting, on which pools require maintenance and are closed for maintenance, and what are the number of water emergencies that are happening every single year. The only way we will address this crisis is by more information and more transparency. I'm proud of the legislation that we're passing today and all our bills in our Parks committees, and I want to thank Speaker Adams very much for your leadership in making sure that we're prioritizing parks, pools, public spaces, and water in our city. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Krishnan. Okay, that concludes our stated agenda, and with that, we'll take on topic questions first.
Yeah, Speaker, does that include your preambles, the preambles that you spoke about? That's considered on topic? The immigrant state.
The legislation, yeah. That's on topic. Everything that my colleagues are standing here with today. Thank you, Bob. Sure, sure.
Question for Keith. So how are you deciding like who's getting the free batteries, who's getting the reduced price, and what would that reduced price be?
We are not deciding today. It's going to be a conversation with the agencies. It's going to be DOT, FDNY, potentially Consumer Worker Protection as well, to establish the criteria here. It's a 2-year program. We are just recognizing it's going to cost probably multi-million dollars here to fund the program. The next step in the conversation is determining exactly the scope and criteria to fund it. To who will be eligible. The bill reopens that conversation with, it creates a lot of flexibility because it allows us to do bikes and batteries. It allows us to do full cost or reduced cost. Now we're going to have the conversation, and it's going to include all the different stakeholders as normal to make sure that we get the program right.
Thank you, Ethan.
Hey, regarding the MSG vote, are you going to include specifics about the transit management plan that MSG will have to submit, or is that something that's TBD?
That's something that's TBD. Everything post our vote today, we're still ongoing with MSG, so that is to be continued.
Mayor Adams was quoted as saying, "Never in my life have I had a problem that I didn't see an ending to." I don't see an ending to this. This issue will destroy New York City. Speaking about the migrant crisis, of course, Governor Abreu of Texas jumped on this to validate his critique of sanctuary cities. I take it from your opening remarks, you don't think New York City is that fragile. And is it fair to say you see immigrants as part of what has made New York City so resilient over the arc of its long history?
What you just said, when I opened up we have a history, and it's not just in New York, we have a history of immigration, of positive immigration. Resilient immigration, vibrant immigration coming into all areas of our nation. We are a nation built on immigrants, and I don't believe that and it is a crisis. I don't believe this crisis is going to destroy New York City. You know, there are a lot of challenges that our city faces, and it requires, of course, more support from all levels of government and stakeholders. We are resilient. We know how to rise to the occasion to emerge stronger. We came through a global pandemic. We came through 9/11 that we just commemorated a couple of days ago. We're going to come through this also, but we have to shift towards long-term strategies that strengthen our infrastructure, which was an issue way before the crisis started. So we've got to shift a little bit towards solutions to solve those issues that have long affected our longtime New Yorkers and can help our existing communities and new arrivals.
So I'm just wondering, a lot of this depends on the federal government. The
Yes.
federal government continues in a kind of dysfunctional way. It's still arguing over who won the 2020 election. New York has to be self-reliant here because the cavalry may not be coming. New York State has been refunding the stock transfer tax since the 1980s to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars. Why not consider for a brief period of time until the federal government resolves its situation to stop giving that nickel back to Wall Street so you can deal with this without cutting this services to this vibrant?
I certainly think that we need to continue, and we will, ongoing conversations about how New York can best be self-sufficient, how we can stand up a little bit taller and a little bit stronger. I still hearken back to the fact that we are coming out of a pandemic still, and we were way behind the 8 ball before we ever got here. So those are the things that we have to look at. We have to look at the past, what got us here. We have to look at the present, how we're here. And we've got to look at the future, how we sustain what is the strength of New York. Thanks, Bob.
You got 15% budget cuts coming from the agencies on the order of the mayor through the spring, I believe. One, if you would like to react to that request that the mayor gave the agencies, and then two, when you head into budget season for next year with the fiscal cliff, federal funding drying up, what's going to be the council's game plan on getting that budget through when you have so many costs going to migrant services?
Yeah, well, there's no question, you know, that we are facing budget gaps in the out years, primarily due to unique economic challenges and the sunsetting of billions of federal dollars right now. We've been spending our funds to support the tens of thousands of asylum seekers arriving here, and the council is examining that spending, of course. To your point about extending our vision to our next budget, again, there will be ongoing conversations about funding coming into the city. We are still hopeful that we will get funding, the much needed funding from our federal partners, from our state partners, that things will start to move. We are hoping that the magnitude of the proposed PEGs, freezes, hiring freezes, and all of those things. We are holding out hope that there is not a lot of damage done because of those proposals, but that we really do have the reliance on our federal and state partners to give us the help that we deserve.
And then just to follow up, because you've seen cuts from these agencies, you know, you were up here just saying earlier about, you know, we have a shortage of lifeguards, for example. What is that going to do to council's priorities when they're past, you know, trying to address these issues, and all of a sudden the city hiring freeze puts a wall right up there?
Yeah, great question. We have to, as we always do, deliberate very carefully. We're going to have obstacles that we haven't seen before in prior budget discussions, in deliberations, and certainly in our determinations of how we move when it comes to the budget. We are going to be hurt by cuts. Agencies will suffer, and unfortunately, long term, we fear that that the services that we need so much in the city will suffer as well. It is going to be up to the council, though, to make sure that we prioritize appropriately, adequately, and with quite precision on how we prioritize the greater needs for the city of New York. But it is going to be difficult.
Speaker, back to the mayor's comments about
Yes.
the crisis destroying New York City. I mean, what do you think he was trying to accomplish with that statement? I mean, obviously he's very frustrated that he's not getting help from the feds and the state, and they're getting criticized for what he's doing. But, you know, what do you think he's trying to do there exactly?
I can't really speak for the mayor, and I always say, you know, I'm not going to put words in the mayor's mouth. We are facing a tremendous uphill battle financially in the city of New York. We desperately need, and I will use the word desperately, we desperately need the help of our federal partners, of our state partners to help us. You know, $100 million here and there is not going to really put a dent in what we are looking at right now over the course of FY24, FY25, FY26 right now with what we're looking at. As far as longtime New Yorkers and New Yorkers, as well as everything else that we have to protect in between. So I believe that we will continue our clarion cry along with the administration for our federal and state partners to help us financially.
At least one of the recently unsealed indictments in the case against former DOB Commissioner Abreu made reference to a top Adams aide by title, apparently bringing in the Lewis Martin. What concerns, if any, does this raise for you about the way the administration is operating?
Well, you know, I can't really speak to the specifics of the case. I think that it is a very sad state of affairs. It's disappointing and it's troubling and it's very sad to see legal allegations arise. And we know as public officials, we have a responsibility to the people of the city and to remain committed to honoring the trust bestowed upon us. There really is no place for activity that violates public trust. Any other thing as far as the administration or anything else, I really don't have any comment on that.
Regarding the indictments, is there any specific action that needs to happen within the council to make sure this doesn't happen, make the consequences more severe? What kind of things are you thinking of to prevent corruption like this from occurring?
Well, the council right now, we continue to take a look at, you know, the way that we operate. We believe that we already have our operation plans and plan in good standing. We cannot account, however, you know, for any kind of action that individuals choose to take upon themselves.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you.